Ashmita Arora is a spiritual teacher, a clarity intuitive, and transformation guide who supports people through grief, heartbreak, burnout, disconnection, and spiritual awakening. Through her practice, the intuitive practice, she offers individuals couple sessions, both online and in person, helping clients see the root of repeating patterns and experiences deep clarity and lasting inner shifts. Her work, shared through sessions, writing and talks, is grounded in her own seasons of dismantling and rebuilding, and centers on creating safe, confidential spaces where people feel seen, understood, and gently guided back into alignment with themselves. Thank you so much for joining me. And it's late at night for you there. I've enjoyed our conversation already before I hit record, so I know we're gonna really enjoy each other's company for the next hour or so. So I just wanted to take you back a little, if that was okay, just to understand who you were in your formative years. Would your 16-year-old self recognize who you are and what you are today?
I would say bits and pieces.
Mhm.
I think I couldn't have foreseen how my life would have turned out or the experiences that I've had. I think those were things that in my wildest dreams I couldn't have predicted. And my 16-year-old, I think, would feel a big sense of relief and peace.
Mm.
Yeah.
So when you look back on that early life and perhaps a little bit later, what would you say were the first moments that made you feel there was something more beneath the surface of an ordinary experience?
I think ever since I was very young, I always had a feeling like there was some sort of magic in this world, so to speak, because that was the best way that we could kind of uh, for foretell it or feel
Mhm.
it. It was just like this inner knowing, and so I was always drawn to things such as like the paranormal or something kind of mysterious or magical stories. It was something that always appealed to me. So I always sensed that around me. I also felt very sensitive, but I think that reality kind of hits, and when you're growing up and you're seeing just the 3D world and how things are, a lot of that magic starts getting sucked out because you wonder how certain things are possible. And I think it's really relatable, but I really dealt with this anxiety of death. And not for myself, but my grandparents, who I'm very close to. I'm still very close to them. And when I was growing up, my grandma had a heart condition at one point. My grandfather had gotten diagnosed with cancer. And so just as a young child, I would hear my friends' grandparents passing away and things like that. And I was so close to them that I could not imagine what would happen if I was to experience that. And it was one of those things that just started to replay in my head the fear of having them pass away. And I didn't know it at the time, which later came out that it was like a form of OCD, the repetitive thoughts.
Yeah.
And I had dealt with that for years and years, where it would almost like play out as a story for me, like a storyline of, okay, this happened. I found out that they passed away. Now, what am I going to do at the funeral? What am I going to say? And it was like I was living in this high stress kind of function without actually having gone through that event. And so there was a multitude of different experiences that had hit me in my 30s that brought me to a completely different realization about life and how it's meant to be experienced.
Do you, it's funny. I was listening to somebody talk yesterday about their mother and father both dying, and they were talking about how the father's death was a good death, and what he was saying was that because he got to know his father, he always talked to his father, they sort of shared all the experience they could experience, they talked about death, they talked about how the ceremony would be after death, etc. And it was described as, yeah, there was comfort in actually having those conversations about it. Do you think it feels like a very Western thing where we just don't talk about death, and then when it happens, it hits us so hard because we've not had those conversations. First of all, do you agree? And secondly, why do you think there is this almost fear of talking about death?
It's In the Western society, I would say it in some parts, it does lose a lot of touch with spiritual concepts of
Yeah.
things like the rebirth,
Hmm.
and it comes with more of a fear factor of, like a heaven and hell type of situation, and so I think that's part of it. I think that the other part is just how commercialized that's become with things like inheritance and
Yeah.
things like that. Um, there is a lot of peace, and it's the unknown, and the unknown is always uncomfortable, and that's
Hmm.
even what it's like people won't talk about divorce. It's still, somewhat of a even though it's very relevant, somewhat of a taboo to talk about those kinda things where it's not a successful marriage if it doesn't last forever, but in reality, it could be a very successful marriage for a moment in time, and then it moves on and progresses into something else.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of things like that that we just don't speak of because nobody wants to talk about the unknown. And so there is peace, and I've gotten to this point in my life where I've gained this inner peace knowing that things happen in life. And as long as we are grounded and we see it as an experience, then we can learn to enjoy it. We can learn to feel the pain behind it, but we can still have this solitude within us. We can still have this inner peace. And so it's like a tree. I like to say we're like the stump of a tree, and then we have our branches, and these life experiences are our leaves. They're going to fall, they're going to change colors, they're going to shift, and there's nothing we can do about that. We have to hold strong within ourselves, experience it, and know when the time comes to change, it's going to change. When the time comes to grow, it's going to grow. And that's how I've kind of felt this inner calm, but it didn't come easy. It came through a lot of hardship. It came through a lot of pain and a lot of realizations.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Did, so was there a, oh, this is a very naive question, sorry, but what was the, did you experience a, sorry, let me go back. You were saying before we started that your grandfather, your father, both sort of educated in traditional ways and expected you to sort of follow the same path and go off to college and do the sort of standard degree and things. So was there a moment where you felt there was something different about how you saw life? Or was there a moment that you would describe as a spiritual awakening, or was it something that manifested over a longer period of time?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I would say I'm very intellectual. I can catch concepts very easily. I can articulate myself well, but for some reason, I absolutely hated school.
Hmm.
I
Same.
hated school. And it wasn't until I got to college and started taking business courses because that's what I wanted to do, where I found an interest and actually cared about going. But it was almost as if I'm not kidding you, it's like I had an allergic reaction to going to school, to the point where my counselor, he used to say, "Come for 1 week, just show up to every class for 1 week, and I'll get you lunch, or I'll do this." And funny enough, his son was on the same hockey team as my brother. So if I didn't show up at school or one of my classes or something like that during the day and I was at the ice rink at night, he'd be like, "Where were you today?" I'd get busted, but it was weird because I couldn't even explain it to myself where like, why was I not able to just do wake up every day and go? Like, what was I feeling? And, I felt dread, complete dread, and I would get sick, like, actually get sick, stomach aches, like, all this, and I was social, I had friends and all that kinda stuff, so it wasn't that, but years later, I had gone through a lot of miscarriages and pregnancy losses with my husband, and there was a lot of, turmoil, and my parents had gotten separated, my grandma was very ill, and I was very, very high stress, very anxious, and I ended up getting parts of my face would become paralyzed, parts of my body would become paralyzed, and I didn't know what was going on. I mentally thought that I can handle all of it, and physically, it was taking a toll. And so I couldn't even talk properly when I would have like these episodes. And it all came down to me getting more into meditation and more into calming myself and my nervous system. And one day when I was meditating, I heard a pop, and it was right at the top of my head. I had this pop sound, and it was like this audible pop. And after I had that pop, it was as if this veil or this gate had been opened, and I was able to start communicating with other frequencies or other people that had passed away and different things like that. And I had through this, there was a lot more to that experience, but through that, I also found that had I gone down because there was also career things that with my health deteriorating, I couldn't give my work my all. Every
Mm.
time I would try to do something, I would start getting that sick feeling that I used to get with school. Every time I would try to follow that straight and narrow path of just, you know, going through the very 3D life type of expectations, I would just get sick. I couldn't explain it. I still, can't properly explain it unless somebody understands the spiritual side of it. But if I had gone that route and been successful, I would have never had to go through a lot of the turmoil or a lot of the mental anguish and stress that brought me to the awakening. So it was almost like I was supposed to know I had this potential, and I knew how to do things and I could do things, but when I tried, I physically was stopped every time. And I would keep getting sick, and like I said, even with school, I would if I wanted to go, I just started feeling very sick. And it kind of went hand in hand. And I've learned that my body is my first signal of being like, you're on the wrong path. But through the awakening, it all kind of came to the forefront where I had to go through different challenges, and I had to find my way through them and elevate the way that I looked at things and looked at situations and came through with non-judgment. Because had I gone that regular path, I would have perhaps thought about people that hadn't or people that didn't enjoy it as lazy or this or that. And it because that's how I thought of myself. Well, I wasn't lazy, but because I didn't have that same ability to just go in and out every day, I thought maybe something's wrong with me. I don't understand. I didn't it didn't make sense until I literally went out of my senses to bring me back. And then the interesting thing was the clients that I had um, that I continue to have all come to me with different patterns that I have already experienced and gone through. I have not had one that I have not also experienced that pattern. And so it's so interesting how that happens because when you start to get into alignment and you start to work from a place of allowing these situations to flow through you and changing the lens of which you see them, then it becomes almost like your medicine because you can give advice and you can give them information from a very lived experience rather than a textbook.
It's fascinating. We talked before we hit record a little bit about education, and I guess the world is set up generally to deal with, and this is the wrong word, but the sort of the average or the mean of people in terms of, my son's school, I don't know what there are. There might be, I'm trying to think, 600, 700 pupils. And they're all taught, there's a school nearby that has 1,200 pupils. And the schools, I know that have many more than that and many fewer than that. And they obviously teach to a schedule, to a timetable, to a subject. It's assuming in a way that everybody, first of all, everybody learns in the same way, everybody's engaged in the same way, and they're going to produce people at the end of the decade or more of education that all think and behave in the same way. But I do feel that there is slightly more recognition that perhaps we need to think a little bit differently, especially in the light of the the growth of AI and technology and all these things that are supposed to connect us and support us, but we feel challenged by, it does feel that there are more forces out there that are helping us see things in a different way. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. And, it's interesting because a lot of people that are scared of AI taking over jobs, if we really look at AI, it's a program. It
Mhm.
only knows what's put into that program, and that's what it runs with. And so it can't bring through anything truly unique. It has to run on the system that was created. And everyone's saying, AI, it's this new thing. It's not new. Schools have been doing this for centuries. Like we've confused intelligence and knowledge and
Mm.
memorization because what they've done at school is set it up so that we just memorize, memorize, memorize. So that's information coming in. That's what we know. And then we regurgitate it because they teach us, you know, what to think. They're not teaching us how to think or how to learn things for ourselves, guiding us that way. Not all of them. I feel like if you're easily illusioned, then school can just be prime for practice of just repetitive tasks. But if you have
Mhm.
something specific that you want to learn how to do that, then that's the right way to use education. But to put everybody in that same category of memorize this and regurgitate this with no sense of individuality, with no sense of creative nature, that hurts our spirit truly, because we do need to bring those things together. There's a place because we are in a physical realm. There is a place to remember things and memorize things, such as like basic math.
Mhm.
And there's another part which is very small in school, which is like art and sciences and things like that in this creative lens. And they need to combine it and make it equal, the intellect and the intuition. And they need to be brought in together. And I think we're going to go more in that realm. We have to because the world is changing so much and AI is going to force us to get into that type of mode because what they're primarily saying is, "Hey, we're here, and if you can't think for yourself
Mhm.
and you can't function and be creative on your own right, we're going to take over your job. It's going to force you to start seeing something more. It's going to start making your wheels turn and making you become more creative and come up with different types of things yourself. It's giving us back a sense of individuality. It's giving us that oomph that we didn't have because we were all almost like industry workers, right?
Mm.
Like line workers and like, this is what you do day in and day out, day in and day out. And so it's coming as a relief, but we won't see that sense of relief. At first, it's gonna be a sense of shock and threat. And the more that we watch mainstream media, we're gonna see that AI is a threat, and we're gonna start to see all these scary stories coming out about how people are losing this and losing that with AI, and they are going to make us scared of AI because
Mm.
AI is part of that next evolution to bring us to the next era of living, the Aquarian era.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because people often don't remember their childhood before they're sort of 4 or 5, but I remember with my children, you'll certainly remember with yours, that when they're that age, when they're sort of 3, 4, and they're exploring, and they're outside, and they find a stick, or they find a stone, or they find whatever, their imagination is literally endless as to what that stick is. It's a magic wand, it's a broomstick, it's a sword, it's a radio, it's anything. I've no idea. 'Cause I'm not a 4-year-old, but they pick up this stick and it becomes so important, and they bring it home. And we used to have a pile of sticks and stones in the garden that my children wouldn't do without or wouldn't leave behind. But that the imagination is there. It's a bit like when children in the playground, they'll rush over to you and say, "Oh, mommy, daddy, I've met, can Joe come over for tea?" You think, well, who's Joe? Oh, he's my best friend. I've just met him like 2 minutes ago. Whereas we we don't. I guess thankfully as humans run up to each other and say, "Hey, you're my best friend." Now we don't do that, but there is something that once they get into that standardized way of thinking that it does sort of drain that imagination somewhat. And I think, like you're saying now, hopefully it's the time where people are recognizing that actually it's okay to think things, to dream things, to imagine things, to be that curious, that's a great word, to be that curious person. Don't just accept, be curious about things. Because what society, government, politics want us to do is not necessarily to be creative, thoughtful, heaven forbid, disruptive. They want people that are sort of standard and are paying their taxes and doing the things, and that's it. And that's, yeah. Sometimes it feels it's easier just to go along with the flow rather than break out and be a little bit thoughtful in how you do things. Sorry, that was a long statement with no question. When was it you realized that the intuitive practice needed to exist, and what was it that drew you to recognizing that was your current destiny?
Yeah, the intuitive practice, it came about through my experiences, through seeing the kind of clients. Because so when I started having that pop that I spoke about, I started getting these messages and downloads, as some call them. But the thing was, I was also postpartum, and I had thought I was having postpartum psychosis. I thought I was going insane. I was like, I think I'm talking to like people that have passed away. Like, what? I just said to my husband, I said, I think you need to take me to the hospital. Like, something's wrong. And he goes, there's no way you could have known where my grandfather used to keep his umbrella or the type of table that he had. You've never met him. And I go, yeah, but I couldn't believe, I felt like people around me could believe it and question it less than I was. Because although I always felt that there was something spiritual in this world, very magical, when it happened to me, I still was in a state of disillusion because I felt like, or not disillusion, but I just felt like, how? It didn't make sense. I don't understand how I know these things. And then when I would see people and I would start getting downloads, I kept wondering, is this judgment or is this something I know? Am I making an assumption? And so one of my girlfriends, I started kind of telling her what was coming through, and she just looked at me, and I had other friends, and they're like, no, no, like, how do you know that? And I remember she introduced me to her friend, and I just, out of nowhere, I said to her, what is this thing about you and a lotus? And she literally pulled her shorts up, because on her upper thigh, she had a tattoo of a lotus. And then she was explaining the story, and I thought, okay, there is something here. So through that, I started doing readings for people, and then I go, you know what? There's more. This is a little too surface for me to just spend 15 minutes to give you a little hint. Like, there's people need help, and they have patterns that they keep repeating, and patterns that are affecting their lives, and they need somebody to help them work through it. And although when I sit with a client, I can see their soul pattern, for me to unload everything on them would, quite frankly, scare them, because it goes very deep into information, and it's almost like you can see something that's been built up through somebody's entire life and past lives, and to just regurgitate it all to them at once, I've learned it's a lot. And so the practice came through putting together pieces for them to go through, and parts that they can digest slowly and transform or gain that clarity that they're looking for. And so I put that together, and I wrote a book called Portal to Self as well, which helps them recognize their patterns. And with that recognition, they gain the clarity that they're looking for, essentially.
So a lot of clients must come to you having tried other things, whether that be standard therapy, self-help. I was worried about with self-help. Always sounds like you're broken. We need to fix you. I don't think people need fixing necessarily, but obviously, so therapy, self-help, different courses, but they obviously still feel stuck when they come to you. And I
Yeah.
wonder what are the patterns that you see, and why perhaps insight doesn't necessarily become change.
Yeah. One of the biggest patterns is people that are coming through, they have tried different spiritual services as well. They've
Mhm.
gotten addicted to things like tarot cards.
Mhm.
They've gone to therapists. And the thing is, a lot of times, it's that their pattern is literally that they don't feel as if they're enough. They feel like
Mhm.
no matter what they do, they're
Mhm.
not they're not doing enough. They're not like the answer will never be enough. So they will keep doing and doing and doing until you're like, what is enough? In reality, what is this that's trying to come up and have you notice it? Because that's all the patterns is something about us, something an inner belief about ourselves that is raising awareness and saying, "Hey, can you check me off the list? Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you see how I'm affecting your life?" And so when you bring that to their awareness and they can see that that pattern has existed and they can typically trace it back all the way to childhood, and it's that pattern that can break,
Yeah.
because self-help is saying something is broken, something is wrong with you. What we're here to do is expand
Mhm.
as humans. And so when we play the game, we have situations that contract us, that put us into these boxes. We're meant to realize that we're in a box, and then we can expand out of the box. And then we might be in another box, and then we expand out. But they're all learning experiences. And that's what it is. It's the feeling free, because it always comes down, I've noticed, to fear, guilt, and obligation. That's been the
Mhm.
three main markers of where people feel stuck when they start recognizing why they do the things they do, or why they end up in the situations, or why they meet the people that they meet. It tends to come down to situations that have evolved from those 3 aspects. And so it's all about just evolving and recognition, not fixing. There's nothing broken. You can't break something that's whole and that will always be whole and infinite. It's just not possible.
Mm. It's a powerful thing, isn't it? To think as a parent when your child is born and think, right, well, welcome to your life of fear, guilt, and obligation. Which, but yeah, but as you were saying, I was sort of trying to think, well, what about this? No, but all the things I was thinking of do fit within
Yeah.
all those boxes really.
Yeah.
And we talk about intimacy a lot on the podcast, and I think throughout the last 100 or so episodes, I think we've come to realize that intimacy is ultimately about being known and met. And I wonder what you think blocks people's ability to let themselves be truly seen.
They when you're with another person as well, it's like magnets. No matter
Hmm.
what you think, even if you think, "Oh, that was the wrong match," there was something in their frequency and your frequency, your 2 magnets that connected. Otherwise, you just wouldn't even be on the same playing level. You would have never connected to begin with. And a lot of the clients that I get that are having issues in communication or in other things, they're failing to see themselves in that other person, because that's we raise awareness in each other,
Hmm.
and we're meant to meet each other and recognize and grow either together or raise each other up and then let each other evolve, or sometimes it is toxic, and so you recognize that and you still can grow through that. I think a lot of it comes through not being able to understand and place blame on others rather
Mm.
than that self-reflection. And so the other big thing is we're always saying what we need in a relationship. What When you go into something with the sense that you need something, you will always need something. If you are adding if you're, I don't know, eating cinnamon, you don't expect to taste an apple because you're eating a cinnamon stick. So if you're
Mhm.
going in with need, you're not going to get fulfillment because you're going in with need. Everything that we need is inside of ourselves. Once we evolve through that and we find that self fulfillment, then we attract partners that can amplify that and bring in like an abundance of joy or companionship, things like that. It's just when we start to really lean on other people to find that sense of fulfillment, when we start to put our inner needs on them. You can never truly depend or rely on something outside of yourself to make you whole. And that sounds much easier said than done because it is, but it comes from a sense of growth. And like I explained before, it is that same tree stump metaphor where you are the stump of the tree. These relationships that you build are your branches, and how they evolve are your leaves, and you have to understand that they can change and grow. And you have to see it for what it is, so you can enjoy it. But if you start to think that it's part of your stump and it's going to keep you grounded, then you start to put a lot of pressure on that relationship, on the intimacy. And communication is key. You could say what you like. You could say, "Hey, I'd love more of this." And they can give you more of that, or vice versa. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying once you get to the place where you feel like you need it, otherwise you're suffering, or otherwise you're not whole, or you see the difference of
Mm.
what I'm saying? You can communicate things that you would like to experience, but if it comes down to you feeling like you need to have that in order to be a whole person in itself, that's where you start to run into trouble.
It's funny, isn't it? 'Cause a lot of the media, or a lot of films, a lot of sort of romantic comedies, they're always about, you complete me, you're my missing piece, now I'm whole, all that sort of stuff. And we go into those relationships, if we start to get serious in a relationship, thinking, well, this is the relationship for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And it's, gosh, that is a big need in the beginning, isn't it? To say, right, I need this to last for the next 50 years happily. It's a big ask of anybody, really. But
Well,
that's how our society's programmed us, I guess. Like, if you have a happy, successful marriage, and it's almost that sort of saying, well, okay, so if you sort of split up after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, even though you might have had some amazing times, then that's somehow it's a failure. That's how things are seen, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, it's the mainstream media really dictates a lot of how we look at ourselves. Imagine if you're saying, "Okay, I have my career together, but I don't have a relationship. So I'm in lack. I'm not whole. I don't have everything." Or I
Mhm.
have the relationship, but I don't have the kids, or I don't have the career. There's always something, right? Like, how much can we really shift around and spread ourselves thin trying to go crazy? And then I've got people coming in with major burnout because they're trying to handle everything at once. And I know I've been there. Like, it's not easy, but we need to just take the pressure off and be more present. And that's something else that we can look at with Western cultures and Eastern cultures as well, and see the way that the Zen lifestyle really is so important to our health, to take that moment and just step into a state of presence, and not thinking about what we need to achieve, what we need to get done, but just a moment of just self, and knowing that that's the only place we need to be is right then and there. And I can't tell you how much relief this can bring into your life, because I have a very, very high highly productive life. I've got 3 kids, I have my husband, and my dad's actually, he has a chronic kidney disease. He had a donor, so she's come forward, so he's getting his transplant next month. But
Wow.
I also have 2 grandparents that have dementia, and I'm their main caretaker. And it's very progress in the last 3 months or so, it's been a very, very progressive, dementia, where he's forgotten a lot of things and just lots of behavioral changes. So there's so much going on. And like I said, being the main caretaker, but also having the 3 kids and 2 businesses, and then my husband works, it's so much. But if I didn't take that time to be very present with where I am, forgive myself for not replying right away, or making changes when I have to, or taking that moment that I needed, I would be in trouble. I'd be burning out very, very fast. But because I've gone through that, and now I can do more by doing less, in a sense, and not have to feel this pressure of, okay, if I don't reply right now, I might lose that opportunity. It's okay, I need to breathe, and then I'll get to this soon. And it's not saying to avoid responsibility, nothing like that, but we hold ourselves to such a high standard when we don't always have to. We can balance better. We can do little things that help us. It's okay to do things at 80% or 70%, some days 30%. It does not always have to be 100 all the time. And that's where imbalance always happens, right? Day to day, it changes. Some days the kids need more of the priority, sometimes the grandparents, and sometimes the work. And you just have to ebb and flow and allow for that to happen. Because if you don't, if you're trying to hold everything together, then that's when my clients come through, because they've broken down, everything lands at zero, and they get stuck at zero for quite a while until they can build themselves back up.
And that was a great way of describing things. Because we often hear about just two things. We hear about the sort of work-life balance. And the suggestion of balance is that each one of them gets 50%. They all weigh the same. But I've always thought, much more like you, that it's much, much more fluid. And sometimes there's great demands from work, sometimes there's great demands from home life, sometimes great demands from yourself. And it's, and almost forcing yourself. No, I've already done X hours on that one. I've got to go and do X hours on this one now. It does feel like the wrong thing to do, really. But I completely agree with the whole being present or in the moment. And as an example I always use is that I was watching a news report on a Taylor Swift concert, and actually news report on the new Pope being announced, Pope Leo, and they showed the crowd watching these amazing events, these once-in-a-lifetime events, if you're fortunate to buy tickets and things. And 95% of the crowd were watching the event through their smartphone, through their device. They're creating this barrier between them and the actual event itself. And they probably would never look at that footage or those photographs, whatever. But I did think, when I see that, I think, my goodness, just the most amazing moment. You're seeing something so many other people aren't seeing. You're there, you're feeling it, hopefully. But if you're watching it through your device, you're somehow numbing the experience. And I totally agree about trying to be in the moment. And sometimes it's hard, but I think it's much, much more powerful than holding up our phones to see life passing by.
That I actually saw this today, and I was thinking the exact same thing, because my husband and I are taking the kids away on vacation. We were trying to see what the weather's like. So I said, okay, let's see if anyone's live streamed from Disney and just see how the weather is right now. And so we put it on, and there was different activities happening, and you just see everybody watching it and recording it through the smartphone. And I just thought in my head, I go, are they experiencing the moment? It's so funny that you mentioned that, because it was just like hours ago that happened, and I had the same thought. And I think I've noticed that a lot, and people taking pictures of like the food and really missing the part of sitting and just enjoying it, truly enjoying it without watching something, enjoying it, in peace and quiet, and experiencing the flavors. And these things are so underappreciated by many. And on the other side, when we're watching TV, for instance, and eating, we tend to eat more when we're socializing. And not that that's a bad thing, but when we're socializing and eating, we tend to nibble more if we're, sitting down at the table, or when we're really present in that one meal and doing that one thing, we eat less. We start noticing when we get full. We start realizing all these things that come up, and that has to do with presence and being in that moment and your awareness, and it changes. Because how many times do we truly only do one thing at a time? Listening to music, or doing this, or cleaning and watching some, like, when do we just take those moments and be right in that moment? We rush a lot, and that's why a lot of people say too, like, how can I have this and this and this and this? Well, why? What's going to fall apart if you slow down? Just slow down, relax. And then if we don't, the way that the universe is working right now, it just does it for us. There's things that come about that force us to slow down, like the burnout, like getting sick,
Mm.
like setbacks, like just day-to-day life things that tend to make us slow down. Or we get to a point where we say we've done this so much, like, I can't keep living like this. I can't keep living on repeat. I can't keep, trying to hold everything together. I feel like I'm falling apart. Feeling suffocated is one that I hear a lot. Is I've been trying to do everything and I just don't understand. I feel like I'm suffocating constantly. And so things like that come about. But it's all just asking us to slow down and be present in the moment. Just feel each moment for what it is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's come about because we've heard such words as multitasking has been a good thing, or we heard you can have it all as you should have it all.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't want it all. I'm happy with what I've got. But I think the food analogy is such a perfect one. I think of the way we experience food and the way we experience sex as something quite similar. So I can remember I might be sitting on the sofa on my phone, reading a book at the same time, eating a peach or an apple or whatever. And I've no idea what that tasted like. I really haven't. I couldn't describe it. Whereas the other day I got a fresh peach from the local greengrocer. The sun was shining here for the first time in months and months. I went outside and just looked and felt the sun and ate this peach. Oh my goodness. It's the same peach. It felt so different. And the same with intimate moments. If I'm being intimate with my partner, my mind might be thinking, oh gosh, I haven't done this, or I've forgotten to do that, or I need to go and do this. The experience becomes very mechanical and very perfunctory, as opposed to being in the moment and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm with this person that I have all these incredible feelings for. What an incredible taste, what an incredible sensation. It just feels so different, but it's the same physical act. But I think mentally being tuned into the food, to the intimate moment, does feel so different. You're so right. I think it
Yeah.
just multiplies how you feel and how you sensate so many times.
Yeah. It's all things are relationships. Your
Yeah.
relationship with your intimate life, your relationship with food, your relationship with clothes, and relationships breed experiences. And so we get to choose how we experience these things in our life. That's all it's about. This whole thing is a lived experience. It's um, a giant experience, and the experiences are meant to help us grow. And when we experience things like, say, in our intimate life, and we feel that abundance from it. We feel the fulfillment, we feel the enjoyment from it. It makes us glow more. When we
Mm,
feel that with food, you glow more, you enjoy the food more. When you have that with a friend, when you're talking to them, you come out of that conversation feeling so happy and energized, not drained, not
mm,
forced that you had to go see them, things like that. And so what people don't understand is the way that energy works is it keeps on amplifying and amplifying and amplifying. And so when we start to make it robotic and stagnant and make it very repeated and take the actual experience out of it, we just create this baseline of energy that we stay at instead of evolving and allowing it to keep growing. It
mm,
just becomes this baseline. And then when it just keeps going like that, we really feel the dips. We really can feel the dips, and then we really feel the highs, and then we go back to this baseline rather than allowing ourselves to keep amplifying and keep raising it and allowing ourselves to experience more. And the more that we do that, the more that we just slow down and experience these things, the more that those experiences attract to us, like the magnets.
mm,
And we won't be able to always explain it, but things will come into our lives, and that's when they talk about manifestation and they talk about vision boards and things. But really, this is how it's done: is being in that state of positive expression and allowing your vibration to heighten through enjoyment, through being present, through experiencing things. And so when you do want to experience, say, more intimacy, the more that you're in those moments, and enjoying it, the more you're raising your vibration, the more you'll attract more of that, and it will continue to grow. And so that's one of the keys to really manifesting and living in that state of alignment and spiritual growth is allowing your experiences to really pave your path and seeing them for what they are, and remembering that you don't need them. They are the leaves on that tree, but they're there, and you appreciate them while they're there because things change.
It's so funny you're saying that. It's so I was reading yesterday about seeing ourselves as we are, with the energy sort of wrapped in this sort of human skin for now. And I think if we think of ourselves as being almost receivers, a bit like old-fashioned radio receiver,
Yeah.
and we're sort of able to tune in to receive more. Some people they're set on one station, and that's all they're ever going to receive. Other people, there's it's exactly as you said. It's so weird that almost allowing ourselves to be open to receive other wavelengths, other people's intuition, other people's feelings is a really, really powerful place to be into. And it is about being in the right place, being in the right ability to be able to do that, not just hoping that somehow it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You somehow got to sort of tune yourself almost out of who you are, and tune yourself into who you might feel you want to be, and how you might feel things are going to happen. But no, that's so weird. I was just reading about that.
That's exactly. You've actually nailed it, because when people ask me, when I do readings, and if somebody does come through and they ask me like, how do you get that information? And I go, it's literally like radio. Like, I tune my frequency to be able to communicate and get the information. And so that is exactly how I communicate. And that when you hear people talk about future selves or higher self or these spiritual concepts, all they're truly saying is that sense of imagination that you talked about when you're a kid, when you are playing with that stick and it turns into a wand or it turns into this, all you're doing is tuning your frequency and making it real in that moment. The trick is when you do that, not as an adult, but just in general as a human being, when you can tune your frequency and feel the emotions, the feelings that are connected with those moments, and you stay in that prolonged state of energy, nothing around you necessarily has to change. It's internal. And that magnet will then start attracting and bringing things in from the physical realm to hit that same vibe, that same energetic field. So it's exactly like tuning, and you can tune up, you could tune down, you can tune however way you want to tune. But yeah, you've completely nailed it. That's exactly how I explain it, because there was no better way. And when I have channeled, because I trans channel too, so sometimes they come through, and if I feel something coming through from a lower frequency or a lower channel, you might say I tune it out completely, or don't want that coming in. But that is exactly how I've experienced it personally.
So because you are so intuitive and so in tune, how do you, and it's might be the wrong way of phrasing it, but how do you protect and nourish your own well-being mentally and physically? Because you're holding space for a lot of people that perhaps are coming to you with some very challenging situations, coming to you because they're not necessarily coming to you to say, hey, I just want to come and say my life's so wonderful. They're typically coming to you to say there's things that they perhaps want to experience and change. How do you sort of protect your own self?
Yeah, that's not been the easiest thing for me, quite honestly. There was a lot of times where I would carry it and replay it and rethink it in my head, and it came from I would say more of a place of self-doubt, knowing that I knew more information, for instance, but I had to give it to them, like I said, in digestible bits, because when they're leaving and I'm like, oh, there's so much more I wish that I can fast forward. And so it stuck with me. I had to learn that it's okay to go in those small steps, and it will actually help them get there better, because I would hold it and hold that frequency and see they're still not transformed. I know that they're gonna get there, but they're not there yet. And then I'd almost hold that burden within me that
Mm.
I knew the answer, but, it's kinda like you can give the key to a 4-year-old and tell them where there's $3,000,000 and give them a map, but they're not gonna be able to find their way there. When they get older and they've learned how to use a map and things like that, then they can appreciate it more. So, same kind of concept of guiding them through slowly and giving them little bits and helping them get there. That was challenging, where I had to learn to let go after each session and say,
Mm.
"Okay, I've done my part." I have to let them digest it. I have to let them embody it and then come back for the next part and then the next part. And when I didn't do that, it was stressful. Um I felt like I was taking on what they were going through, and I also used to feel a lot of sense of responsibility to their well-being and take it on as if it was um when we talk about self-healing and fixing, there is no fixing, and at that moment, I thought, "It's my responsibility to help fix this situation, help fix what they're going through," and then I realized I'm not, I'm just here to bring it to their awareness and give them the clarity and let them continue to evolve on their own. And so it was that awareness that came through. I also do a shower with like an energy bath before and after each session just
Mhm.
to cleanse myself, my aura. And I usually do that with salt and things like that. But when I'm trans channeling or channeling, I really have to become aware of where the frequency that's coming through is coming from. If it feels off to me, if I feel anything different, if it just does not feel like it's coming from just light, I just say it's not coming through. And my word is my word, and it does not come through. And it's the strength of the commandment that we have of when we command it to go, it has to go. And that was something else that I just learned to embody and know myself and my frequency. So if something felt off, I would sense it right away. And so I haven't had too much issue with that one.
You just come across as such a strong person to be able to, well, first of all, recognize all those things and then to reflect and then to action. So a lot of people would feel very overwhelmed, and I think a lot of people also. I sometimes think when I sort of talk to people that perhaps are in the therapy space or the well-being space, whatever, I think, oh my goodness, this must be quite frustrating when people come to you like, why aren't you getting it? Why aren't you just, goodness sake, come on, why aren't you getting it after one session, 5 sessions, 10 sessions? But I did like the way you describe when a session's finished, you have to sort of leave it where it is and then come back to it again at the next session and recognize that people are on their own journey in terms of how much it's going to take them to get to places. In the same way, we can all drive, 100 miles and drive it in a straight line, or we can drive it and stop off for detours and things, but we all get there eventually. It's just having the patience to get there. So no, I think the way you describe it is really powerful.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to touch on, and I don't want to take your whole night, so I'll let you go soon. Is that I think a lot of couples that perhaps have been together for, and it's not necessarily how long they've been together. So it could be 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. Perhaps over time, they start to feel disconnected from one another. They don't talk about, and we don't tend to talk about sex, money, and death. We don't talk about, those three things are pretty important, but we don't talk about them. And so they perhaps evolved in what they like, what they don't like, what they feel, what they want to experience, etc. And they're probably both feeling the same thing, but neither of them are saying anything. How do you guide people into almost creating a safe space for that conversation, if that makes sense?
Yeah. You have to so the number one thing is you have to realize people are gonna grow. If you were to see somebody that was a newborn and you see them in 10 years from now, you're gonna notice so many changes, right? The way that they talk or the fact that they're talking and the fact that they're walking and why should that change from 40 to 50 or 50 to 60? There's growth. You
Mm.
see somebody at a year old to 2 years old or from 9 to 10, and there's going to be changes. But somehow we think that when we hit, adulthood, that that stops and that we're set in who we are and that is so far from the truth. We have to continue to evolve. And I've been in probably I'd say 10 to 20, sorry, I'm just shifting my leg here, 10 to 20 different relationships with one person for the last 22 years because of how many times we've evolved and grown. And for us to stay together from I was 15, he was 19, to now 37, and he's almost 41 in a couple weeks. For us to stay together for that amount of time, we had to realize that we're going to grow, we're going to change, and
Mhm.
communication is key. The thing is, if I ever got to a place in my life where I felt like I needed to go this other route without him or something like that, I would communicate to him why that is. And if he couldn't match that frequency, if he couldn't see himself going,
Mm.
we would have, and we've had these talks, we'd have enough respect and awareness for each other to talk about that and allow each other to continue our growth. And so they call it an uncoupling nowadays, but we do something like that. We haven't had to do that, and it's been great. We've got the 3 kids, but we've evolved so much. He's I when I first met him, he was just working at his dad's Subway, and he was going to school and just and I was in high school, and we've just grown together and built this family together, and that has not you can't see the same 15-year-old and 19-year-old that was sneaking out of the house to see each other as the adults and parents that our kids are never gonna hear those stories. But, it's different people, and so
Yeah.
you have to allow yourself to evolve. And so if one person truly wants something, they can allow, if they wanna stay with that other person, the chance to see if that's something that they want to enjoy or experience as well, and allow them to grow into that. And if they don't, then they have to have that self-understanding. And this one I can speak to as a place of myself and my husband, and like I said, 22 years we've been together, and so we've changed a lot in our belief systems. We both grew up with Hindu backgrounds. We were both, decided that that wasn't the path that we wanted for our kids. We were just more open and spiritual and intuitive, and we grew up in stricter homes and different things, different avenues that we've all evolved out of.
Mhm.
And the path that we thought we would go on was not the path that we've landed on. And the fact that we have 3 kids and things like that, these things can't be planned. You grow into these things. So that self-understanding and seeing he's seen me now go through this spiritual awakening and gone into high anxiety, gone through motherhood, postpartum, OCD, go through a spiritual awakening, start talking to people from different dimensions. That is a lot of different personalities happening, but it was an understanding. He didn't expect me to be the same person that was 15 going through all these things. He allowed me to grow, and I've allowed him to grow. And so we've grown together because our end goal has been the same thus far. My parents, they were together for, I believe it was 33 years, something like that, and they had a sudden separation because similar kind of thing where I speak to, the growth was not there. They one wanted to grow, the other didn't wanted the relationship to be how it had always been.
Mm.
So that frequency just kinda shifts. So it brought them to a place, and looking in, I can see why that happened and how it actually helped them. One needed to gain
Mhm.
that independence, one needed the self-realizations. And so that there is beauty in that. There is a lot of heartache in that, but there is beauty in that as well. So with couples, the actionable steps is really to see where you want to go and if that other person can meet you at that frequency. You can't push them to, it has to be something they also want to experience. And that's typically the marker. If you allow each other to grow and you can enjoy it and allow your relationship to keep evolving, it's almost like you're dating somebody new. And if you can do that, you can usually have a very long, sustainable,
Mm.
happy, relatable relationship. But if you get stuck in this idea of this is just what I want, and the other person wants to grow and evolve and they want to move past that, then the friction is going to start. That was a
Mm.
whole spiel, but there's so much to it, truly.
Do you think monogamy is a natural state for us?
I think it's very dependent on the person. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very dependent on the person. I think it's hard to generalize it. I think society has
Yeah,
generalized it,
I
but
guess.
I think I think it's so different because everybody comes in here to play a certain role.
Mm.
And some people are just more free-spirited and wanna experience it differently, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you're doing your own
Mhm.
thing and, and I think that there's truly no judgment. It's when we go into the spiritual realm of all the things, there's no judgment, there's just experiences.
Mhm.
So you can experience it from a place of enjoying life and being upfront about it, or you could do it in a secretive way where it's hurting somebody else. And then you might not have the best experience. They might not have the best experience, but if that's what comes, then
Mm.
they have to deal with it differently. Yeah.
It sounds like you've almost got figured out how to have the best of both worlds. You had 20 relationships within one relationship. So, which I
Yeah,
think is perhaps what
seriously.
I think a lot of people. I mean, there's a difference between, obviously, there's a huge difference between going behind somebody's back and cheating and having a polyamorous relationship. They're you shouldn't even talk about in the same breath. But
Yeah.
I do think a lot of people, perhaps in your situation, I've changed, my husband hasn't changed, or I've changed, my wife hasn't changed. Then you sort of think, well, I better go look something elsewhere, as opposed to thinking, well, why don't we have this conversation and figure out, are we able to sort of tune into the same frequency, and what might that feel like? So yeah, and just two more quick questions before I let you go to sleep. So do you have a feeling or a sensation for where you're going, what the intuitive practice looks like, what your future holds?
So sorry, I just had a kid burst in here.
No, we get the same thing, don't worry.
So
It's best way.
burst out of bed. Could you repeat that question one more
Sorry, I
time?
didn't say, do you have a feeling or a sensation as to what your future feels like, what it looks like, what the future holds for you?
You know what? Every time that I have, my guides have switched it up on me. They've switched it up. It's clarity, bringing people clarity in what they're going through has been it. That's the marker of what I'm here to transcend into the world, but the way it happens has shifted. And the way that it evolves for me has shifted. And so
Mhm,
every time that I feel like this is the one thing that I'm gonna do to get the clarity out there, the clarity part doesn't change, but the way that it happens keeps evolving and
mhm,
keeps putting me through situations which bring more awareness to my own self and my own
mhm,
growth. And what I've come to realize is the challenges that I have in life become my ground for teaching. And so right now I'm in that season of taking care of my elderly grandparents, being the main caretaker, taking care of the kids, taking all of that on.
yeah,
And when I'm in that moment and present and I gain the clarity behind these kids are growing into life and my grandparents are exiting out of life
mm,
and I'm right in the middle and I'm seeing it from both sides, right? And it's bringing so much clarity into their needs and how they're so similar at times, and how it's going in 2 different directions and all these things, and so I get the clarity through that aspect, but then I don't know how or what this one will evolve into. Would it be a course? Would it be a book? Is it something I can't foresee? Is it just for one client that needs
mhm.
something from me going through this? That part, I don't know. That part, I don't know. Yeah. I wouldn't have known during my postpartum pregnancy when I was going through everything I was going through, and I had, like I mentioned, quite a few losses as well, and so it was very gut-wrenching for me, and I went deep into meditation and gaining that inner peace. I would have never known that in, a year's time or in a few months' time, I'd be able to talk to people that had passed to see that it isn't really anything crazy, it's a different frequency, really. and we can attune to it and we can connect to it. And so there's nothing that's non-existent anymore. If it exists, it always has to exist. The form may change, but it has to exist. And so it brought a lot of peace to me. And like I talked about my grandparents and the anxiety I had when I was younger, it brought so much more peace knowing that they're always going to be there. There's always a frequency I can tune into. And this is just another part of our growth. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for your time today. I know it's actually the next day for you now. You were very kind, sort of staying up so late. So no, I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you for just spending some time with us.
Yeah, me too. I really loved being on. Thank you for having me.